and now we're going to spend the next 60 years rehabilitating our soldiers. I'm sick and tired of it.
John in Franklin, New York, any comments?
Yeah, I think that, of course, American foreign policy is eventually up to the American people. One of the big things that we've not been able to discuss in this country for the last 30 years is our policy toward the Israelis. Whether we want to be involved in fighting Israel's wars in the future is something that Americans should be able to talk about. They may vote yes. They may want to see their kids killed in Iraq or Yemen or somewhere else to protect Israel. But the question is, we need to talk about it. Ultimately, Israel as a country is of no particular worth to the United States. It doesn't,
you mean strategically?
We have they have no resources we need. Their manpower is minimal. Their association with us is a negative for the United States. Now that's a fact. What you want to do about that fact is entirely different. But for anyone to stand up in the United States and say that our support for Israel doesn't hurt us in the Muslim world, or our support for Hosni Mubarak's dictatorship doesn't hurt us, is to just defy reality.
You know, so I guess we're always still trying to figure out why this man and the people he has inspired are trying to attack us. And I believe what you say, and I think it's more about our policy than our way of life. But would you grant me this, that as long as there is an Israel in the world, and I'm a big supporter of Israel, and as long as America backs it, the kind of Muslims that take their religion that seriously, that they would strap on a suicide belt, are always going to be out for us and always going to be trying to kill us?
I think we can reduce it very seriously, sir. I disagree with you on Israel, but...
in what way? You're not a supporter.
I hope Israel flourishes. I just don't think it's worth an American life or an American dollar.
You don't think the existence of Israel in the world is worth an American life or an American dollar?
Not only Israel, sir, but Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or Bolivia. I'm much more...
You're really not telling me that Israel is on a par with Saudi Arabia.
I'm telling you, what I'm telling you, sir, is I'm most interested in the survival of the United States.
But Israel is a democracy in a part of the world that has none.
So what, sir? It doesn't matter to Americans if anyone ever votes again.
It doesn't...
We'll get get by just fine, sir.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't get by just fine. So you're saying, like back in 1973, when Israel's very existence was threatened in the Yom Kippur War, and we did come to their aid, we shouldn't have done that, and we shouldn't do it again?
What I'm saying, sir, is we should have revisited the situation after 1973 and not be the unqualified sole supporter of Israel at the moment. I think it earns America tremendous pain and increasingly dead Americans fighting wars that are not ours to fight.
But you did say, I mean, after 9/11, you said the only way to win is to kill more of the enemy.
Yes, sir.
Anywhere we can without a great deal of concern for civilian casualties.
Yes, sir, I said that exactly.
You still believe that? You
Absolutely,
still believe that's
sir.
the way to win, is to kill our way out of it?
That's part of it, sir. The other part is what Mr. Paul has said, is to stop intervening in their world except when it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And what about what Alan Greenspan said this week, that the intervention in Iraq is largely about oil? Would you agree with that?
I think we've frittered away our independence on oil, sir. If something happens in Saudi Arabia, we go to war. If something happens in the Gulf of Guinea, we go to war. In 35 years, the Congress has managed to move daylight savings time up 3 weeks. We're going to pay for oil with American lives in the near future.
Saying there is oil in the Gulf of Guinea is a slur against Italian Americans, and I won't take it. Michael Scheuer, I have to cut you off, but you're always fascinating. Thank you very much. I'm glad you joined us, and please come back soon. Okay.
Turn the topic just a little bit. You have said recently that you think bin Laden died a success story. Most of us are saying, wait a minute, the guy's dead. He didn't succeed. He's overseeing or was overseeing an organization that was faltering. Why do you disagree with that take on the matter?
Well, his goal from the start was not a military goal. It was he always has said, I'm just one Muslim. I have a small organization. Our main goal is to inspire other Muslims to pick up guns or pick up a donation check and fight the United States and drive it out of the region. If you look around the region today, Al-Qaeda is much bigger than it was at 9/11. Its geographical dispersion is much broader. And they've been very effective in a program over the last 5 years to stimulate adherence in English-speaking countries, using U.S. citizen Muslims to do it. So, on a whole, he'll go down in Islamic history as sort of a Robin Hood, at least. Perhaps.
Let me take the other side of this. I don't think there's any question if you were to say he forced us to spend an unbelievable amount of money, arguably go in and fight 2 wars that were not central to our strategic world view in terms of being economically competitive and a whole range and raft of other issues, and he became somebody who symbolized Islamist fundamentalist views, I would agree with you. But on the other hand, he has not succeeded in mounting any successful, significant terrorist attacks. We seem to have infiltrated the pieces of al-Qaeda sufficiently to know what they're doing, and he seems to have been refuted and pushed back even by other members of his own organization who seem to have been rejecting what he was counseling as strategic vision in terms of where to strike.
Well, I think that's what there's discussions in every organization. Al-Qaeda was a multi-ethnic, multilinguistic organization with a lot of difficulties, as any multinational corporation is. But I think we look at, there's no terrorist attack in the United States, but 2 U.S. field armies are being defeated abroad in Iraq and Afghanistan, at least with the rhetorical support and probably with the support of cadre from al-Qaeda. So I think our vision is a little narrow here. When we leave Afghanistan in defeat, we're going to galvanize this generation of Muslims, just like the defeat of the Soviet Union galvanized bin Laden's generation of Muslims. So this is serious business. This is not cops and robbers, sir. We tend to think that Muslims are stupid people, that they're going to forget that the United States supported tyranny for 35 years. We also have become, at least in our political elite, almost Marxist-Leninists in our belief that democracy is the answer to everything and that it's going to take hold everywhere. And what we've created since Runnymede here in North America and England is going to be recreated in the Muslim world in 18 days. I just don't think it's becoming a president or a secretary of state or the war boys, Senator McCain and Senator Graham, to be arguing somehow that democracy is afoot. When clearly it's not.
Well, look, Michael, first I have to disagree with your premise in terms of the overarching view of the Islamic world. And I think there is much greater nuance in the relationship that the President and the Secretary of State and the United States senators, whom you mentioned, are trying to craft with the new leadership. Everybody understands, do they not, that this is a moment of transition. This is a moment where the old ideologies, the old governing structures throughout North Africa and the Middle East are being pushed aside by what is a genuine uprising from the grassroots of the populace. Nobody knows with any certainty where it will go. And I think if you listen to the Fareed Zakarias, the Fuad Ajamis, the real experts in the region, they all say there is enormous uncertainty, but certainly it is better to begin to forge the relationship in terms of the common notions of tolerance, freedom, secular democracy that we believe in. Not believing it will take root overnight, but certainly to articulate those views, than to be a hands-off and let tyranny reestablish itself. Wouldn't you agree with that?
No, I wouldn't. I think Mr. Zakaria and Mr. Ajami know about as much about what's going on there as my chair does. They don't like the idea of Islamist governments, and so naturally their analysis is going to be that they're not happening. Just like Mrs. Clinton, just like Senator Graham, just like the president. CNN and BBC interviewed a few score Muslims in Tahrir Square, all of whom were English-speaking, most were clean-cut, most were professionals, and they talked the talk of democracy. Then they read a few Facebooks and a few Twitters, and they extrapolated that sample to 85 million Muslims, half of whom or more are illiterate. So the West has really got a skewed idea of what's happening in that country. And across the region, sir. It's madness.
Michael, with all due deference to your deep expertise in the region, you have many years.
I didn't claim I had deep deference, sir. What I'm claiming is that 85 million Muslims are not going to go in the direction of a democracy they consider irreligious or perhaps even pagan, rather than toward 1,400 years of tradition.
Michael, let's agree on something. First of all, I think Fareed Zakaria, Fouad Ajami are enormously expert, knowledgeable individuals about the region in particular. And the one thing I would say is that nobody thinks Jeffersonian democracy is going to spring up overnight, that somehow the Bill of Rights that is enshrined in our Constitution will be embraced by 85 million Egyptians. Nobody obviously believes that. But what
you
we
weren't
do
listening to CNN then, sir, during the Tahrir Square business.
Well, again, Michael, with all deference, I think I was listening to it. I was often here. But I think here's the larger point. What we are saying is that there is an arc of history and that there is movement in a particular direction. And while we don't have any illusions about where we'll end up, and we all understand Iran and what has happened in Afghanistan time and time again, what we are saying is that positioning our foreign policy no longer behind the tyrants, but in front of the popular movement in favor of those ideals that George W. Bush articulated in terms of democracy, that seems to make sense. I'll give you the last couple seconds. You obviously think I'm wrong. Tell me why.
I think Bush was wrong. I think Clinton was wrong. I think this guy is wrong. It's just not going to happen in the way you think it's going to happen, sir. And even if it did, if we had democracy from Mauritania to Jordan, what those governments would have to reflect popular opinion. And what you would have is the greatest anti-Israeli movement that you've ever seen in your life, because Israel is hated more than anything in the Islamic world.
The U.S. is the only reason for the survival of some governments in the Middle East. Governments who have some of the worst track records of human rights in the world. And these are the allies of the United States in the Middle East. Muslim governments. But they are dictatorships, tyrannical, totalitarian regimes. And if it is not the U.S. who's backing them, they would crumble one after another.